Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. We're coming to you from the McClatchy offices in Washington, D.C. Pressure's mounting on President Obama to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate whether charges should be laid against those responsible for waterboarding. A vigorous defense has been waged by two of those people. Vice President Dick Cheney and Karl Rove have made frequent appearances on TV. Here's what they've been saying.
These are available on the internet. Anybody can get them. They're well worth reading, and if you do read them, you'll be reassured about what your government was doing, but maybe a little concerned that they weren't doing enough. And the description of the techniques will cause Americans to say, is this torture?
They put out the legal memos, the memos that the CIA got from the Office of Legal Counsel. But they didn't put out the memos that show the success of the effort. And there are reports that show specifically what we gained as a result of this activity. They have not been declassified. I've formally asked that they be declassified now.
So that's the question. Not was it illegal, but according to Cheney and Rove, the question is they were effective. So joining us now to discuss whether or not there's evidence of this is Mark Seibel. He's the managing editor of McClatchyDC.com. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you.
Now, just people should know that this is the way you normally dress, and it's very formal around here. Okay, you're on your way to a charity ball.
That's right.
All right, so you've been last couple of days, you've been poring over the memoranda that were disclosed by the Obama administration, where the waterboarding was authorized. What have you found so far?
Well, one of the things that was interesting to me about the memo was that 34 times, two of the memos cite an Inspector General's report from 2004, CIA Inspector General, that has not previously been publicized. And one of the findings of that Inspector General's report, according to these memoranda, is that there was no conclusive evidence that any of the information that was obtained from waterboarding or harsh interrogation tactics actually led to the prevention or stopping of a terrorist attack. And it was pretty straightforward. And I thought that was unusual.
So Cheney and Rove talking about show all the memoranda, you'll see how effective it really was. In fact, it is there to be seen to some extent, and you're saying there's nothing there to be seen.
I think if they release all the memoranda, there will certainly be memoranda, because there were some written after this Inspector General's report to say, well, yes, of course it was effective. But the Inspector General's report, which is the independent assessment of the CIO's own independent assessment of the program, found that there was no conclusive evidence
that anything was really achieved.
That
by
anything
torture.
was stopped, and you know it's actually, as you read the documents, the ones that were released last week, you see that even though they're trying to be supportive of the harsh interrogation tactics, that in fact they're citing 34 times a report that basically said was highly critical of the program.
What else did you learn from going over the documents?
Well, you learn that in spite of the discussion of all the medical care and concern that was taken in this, that in fact during the period that the harsh interrogation procedures, the waterboarding took place, there were no medical people who had been consulted either on the risk or the effectiveness of the interrogation. We learned that with the first prisoner, Abu Zubaydah, that his interrogators on the ground wanted to stop waterboarding him. They thought he was being compliant and that he'd told them everything he knew. But CIA headquarters insisted that the waterboarding continue. And they even sent people down from headquarters to watch the last waterboarding session, at which point they too concluded, oh, he's told us everything he knows. So we learned that. We learned that the Bush administration's reliance on a military training program known as survival, evasion, resistance, escape, was a very poor predictor of the risks of waterboarding. When waterboarding became public, the Bush administration said, well, it's just something it's no big deal, it's something we even do on our own soldiers as training. But the Inspector General said there's no comparison. In fact, you have people who know they're being trained for a military thing who are waterboarded in sort of a gentle way. And even that was intolerable, and all the services except the Navy have stopped doing it because it's such a physically demanding thing that they're putting on their troops. So we learned that the CIA Inspector General felt that was a very poor way to decide what the risk was. And in fact, as you read the memos, you discover that as they went along, they discovered there was more and more risk. After the memos, after the report was released, the CIA's Office of Medical Services got involved in assessing risk in waterboarding. And it is significant that there was no more waterboarding after that. There was even a prisoner captured. Waterboarding was considered. They believed he had been a go-between between Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan or Pakistan and Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the Jordanian terrorist who at that time was active in Iraq. But they assessed him and said, well, he's obese, he complains of chest pressure. We think waterboarding him would not produce enough information that it's worth doing it because it might kill him. And those kinds of things I don't think have been very well publicized, in terms of the really very graphic and yet very sterile descriptions that we have of waterboarding.
So why shouldn't this Inspector General's report itself now be fully made public?
Well, I don't know whether they will. The CIA says there's no plan to make it public. The ACLU, which has sued to get the report, and actually got a version of it in May 2008. That version, which we've posted on our website, is basically a bunch of heavy black lines. Occasionally you run across the word Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 conspirator, waterboarding, just as isolated words. And then the notation that this section, page 43 to 86, is not being released. And so really nothing has come out on this report. And I think if in fact just the memos were so controversial, I think releasing the report, which some people describe as being the size of 2 telephone books, will be really, really controversial. So I'm not expecting it unless a judge orders it.
And one would think Americans do have a right to know whether or not this was effective or not. The whole Cheney, Rove, Bush defense essentially has been,
well,
look, we really did get good information.
I think if you're going to release some memos on effectiveness, you have to release all memos on effectiveness so that you really have something to judge from. I'm sure that the Senate Intelligence Committee, as it goes through its investigation, which its chairwoman Dianne Feinstein has promised, that I'm sure they will review all of these memos and we will eventually get some judgment on the effectiveness.
Thanks very much, Mark.
You bet.
Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have a $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching The Real News every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.